Now it is time for Sexual Follies. I would just do that every day. That was 45 minutes of doing it. Dr. Shawn Smith is a clinical psychologist specializing in couples therapy and anxiety disorders. And if you're part of a couple, you probably have anxiety disorders. He has written a book called The Tactical Guide to Women, How Men Can Manage Risk in Dating and Marriage. You can find him on Facebook at Shawn T. Smith, PSYD, or on his blog, docsmith.co. Dr. Smith, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Hi, Andrew. Call me Shawn, please.
Oh, thanks, Shawn. So the Tactical Guide to Women, it sounds pretty dire. Why did you decide you needed to write the book?
Well, I've been in the psychology game for a long time, working in the clinic here, and I work with a lot of guys and a lot of couples, and I see these guys who either do really well in marriage or they do very poorly in marriage, and it comes down to the choices that they make, really. And the research, there's a lot of research that says a good relationship is the best thing that can happen to a man. A good marriage, we live longer, we're happier, we make more money, we have more sex, we're healthier. But a bad marriage, the horror stories are everywhere, and I started noticing all these guys that came in with these horrible relationships that they were in, and how it can be devastating. Just one quick example, within the last week, I met a guy who went through a very costly divorce that he had to fund and pay for, and his ex-wife got primary custody because he works quite a bit, and so his wife, after they got divorced, decided to leave the state, take the kids with her. And he had no say over this. He had no legal say, and he couldn't very well follow them because he needed this high-paying job that he has here so that he could support his children and ex-wife that are in another state. And this is the kind of stuff that just devastates guys.
It does. And, I have to say, I meet more and more guys. I've been blessed with one of these weird marriages from God that really has just been absolute delight for 40 years. But I meet guys, especially young guys, who are saying, you know what, I don't even want, it's too dangerous. I do not want to get in this game. Let me ask you this before we get into the actual advice in the Tactical Guide to Women. Have things changed? I mean, as you've been watching people develop, do you think the dating scene and the sexing have changed dramatically?
I do think things have changed with the sexting and the availability of the availability of cheap, easy sex. But there's also, I think, the vast majority of people that are actually looking for some kind of real connection. Yeah. And I think one of the things that's changed maybe in the last 50 to 100 years is that women have always been very good at communicating with each other about the risk management that you need to take into account when they bring a man into their lives, because they've had to be more attentive to the risk. And it's only been maybe in the last 50 years or so, I don't know, I'm not really a sociologist, but wherever we are now, men need to start attending to this, and men are not good at, fathers are not good at talking to sons about how to choose a woman and how to bring a person into your life, whereas women have been doing this for centuries, and we need to get good at it because it is now a big risk for us.
So let's talk about that. I mean, how do you take this risk on? How do you assess the risk when you're going out on a date?
Well, number one, and this is where I start in the book, is you got to know as a man where your motivations are coming from, because we don't get a lot of information from other men about how to choose women. It's really important that we take a look at why we're choosing women. What did we learn by watching the men that were around us, and what kind of history and what kind of experiences are we bringing into our choices? Because if we're not attentive to what drives us, then we're just going to be on autopilot, and we could have all the wisdom or all the information in the world, but we don't have wisdom in choosing women. But beyond that, the biggest piece is knowing the basics about what makes a good partner, and looking at things like, is a woman emotionally stable? These are questions that women have been asking for a long time about us, but we're not asking about them. Do they have good communication skills? And not just when skies are blue, but can they communicate when you're having a hard time? And do they understand that men and women communicate differently, and it's not better or worse, but are they willing to listen to our side, our method of communication? Do they have some basic mental health problems or permeate society, like substance abuse, depression, anxiety, personality disorders I touch on in the book. These are all things that if you're going to be in the dating arena and you're thinking about bringing somebody into your life, you better have a little wisdom about what makes relationships work.
You're essentially saying, I mean, everybody who really pays attention realizes that women are a lot more practical than men when it comes to dating. I mean, men, you know, seriously, I married my wife because she was hot and beautiful and and all this stuff. It was only later that I realized that I'd done a good thing. And I think men get swept away in the visuals and the sexual attraction in a way that women sometimes don't. I mean, women are really thinking, are you a good provider? Women know what they want better, don't they?
Yeah, and you and I have a very similar story. Like I married a hot, beautiful woman who was smart and funny and all that, and it's only been, we've been married 18 years or so. It's only been like in the last 10 years that I really appreciate how good this is, and despite myself, I stumbled into something good because I was not thinking about it and I wasn't planning. Yeah, women do think about these things.
What do you think are some of the danger signs? I mean, you say like look for a woman who's emotionally stable and all this stuff, but what are the kind of obvious things that guys miss when they're on a date?
The obvious things that guys miss, because actually, let me jump back to your previous point. There is some research that says that we are more vulnerable to falling in love quicker or getting attached quicker or becoming sort of territorial about a woman and considering her something that we need to have. And so, yes, we are, to your previous point, vulnerable to that, whereas women tend to be a little more thoughtful. And that's kind of counterintuitive, but there's some research to back that up. And as far as the obvious things guys need to be looking for, the things that we don't see are like, how does she treat the people in her life? How does she talk about her exes? If every one of her exes fell from grace, well, guess what? You're going to fall from grace at some point. If they're all jerks, you're going to be a jerk. Looking at her friends, the people that she surrounds herself with, we get very narrow-minded on this woman that we think we need to have, and we're not paying attention to the people that she chooses to have in her life. And they say that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. That can be very telling. But excuse me. One of the things that guys really need to be attentive to is taking their time, because the qualities that make for that reduce your risk of ending up in family court and that sort of thing, they show up over a long period of time. And we have this honeymoon phase that's been quantified as like 9 to 18 months where we're not thinking straight and they're not thinking straight. And we need to get past that and then give it time and then see what shows up in her personality and her social circle.
That's a long time, 9 to 18 months. I'd always heard it was more like 6 months that you could sort of wait for the chemicals to pass and get a clearer view. I mean, do you really think people have to wait a year and a half before they make any big decisions?
I don't think it necessarily needs to be a year and a half. And this data is coming from research is getting a very rough sense of how our brain chemistry changes when we're in this infatuation stage and when our chemistry deviates from its baseline. And obviously, we don't all have access to these tests. So one way to know when you're coming out of that honeymoon phase is that you're not idealizing this person anymore like you used to, and little things are starting to annoy you, and they're becoming a real human being rather than this idealized person you've been having sex with for 6 months, and it's been wonderful. So when they become real, that's when you're probably exiting the honeymoon.
One of the things that I talk about a lot is I talk about the fact that marriage has become financially or economically, in some ways, it's become a bad deal for men. The children no longer take over your farm. The women sometimes won't make a home for you. I mean, one of the things my wife did that was so valuable to me is she made a home for me. She raised my children. We were a team. I could go out and do some of the things that meant so much to me because of her. Some women don't want to do that. What role do values play in dating? I mean, what should you be looking for in terms? Should you be looking for someone who shares your values, or can opposites attract? Where do you come down on that?
Yeah, the opposites attracts. That's fun because it's like a challenge, and maybe we can win this person over to our side, or there's a little spark there and it's exciting. But the research doesn't back it up, that you really need to find somebody whose values line up with yours. And actually, I have a whole chapter on this. And like I said, that first third of the book is about sizing you up as a man. or you sizing yourself up. And a big piece of that is understanding where your values are and being forthright about it, because men can be chameleons when we're trying to win a woman over. You don't need to hide yourself. Be forthright with yourself about what your values are, and then be unapologetically honest about where your values lie, where your masculinity lies. Don't sell her a bill of goods that's gonna come back to haunt you later.
I think that is such great advice, because I think a lot of times guys basically are thinking about scoring. They want to make a good impression. They hope the girl will stay overnight, and then you find that she's moved in, and you're on that train. And really, I think if you're honest, maybe you'll score a little less, but you'll make a better long-term decision. Really good advice.
Yeah.
Dr. Shawn Smith, the author of The Tactical Guide to Women: How Men Can Manage Risk in Dating and Marriage. Shawn, thanks very much for coming on. Really interesting conversation.
Thank you, Andrew.
All right, Sexual Follies. Can you play it again? Come on, play it again. I mean, I'm here for the laughs, right? I'm not working for pay here, folks. Anyway, really interesting. It's a dangerous world out there. It's good to have some that was decent advice, Jess, right? I mean, you couldn't hear him. Oh, you couldn't hear him. All right, you'll have to listen to it and tell me tomorrow. Decent advice.